This is wall we're working on, and we're literally doing it all in one coat. Now the first thing we need to talk about is thickness. You're going to have to apply the plaster very, very thick, because if we're looking for an overall thickness of 3mm, which is advised from British Gypsum, then we're going to have to put it on thick, and this is actually quite tricky. It's, you've got to take a lot more plaster onto your trowel, so you're loading a lot off the hawk. But generally, what I'm doing is I'm passing plaster in about 2 passes. 2 passes, the plaster's gone from the hawk, so I've got a decent amount there. Really have to load the trowel up, and like I said, it's a bit trickier than it looks, but you need to get the thickness. We've even got bonding on this wall, so we're really going to test out the capacity of this plaster job. It's not like it's just a smooth plasterboard wall, it's an existing wall. We've got bonding, we've got areas got to work around, so we're really putting it through its paces. Now apply the first coat, again very thick, and I immediately flatten it with a spatula. Without this, it's not going to work. I think you can't be doing one coat with just a trowel. We need to be using something with a long rule, and we need to make sure we're getting our walls dead flat from the beginning. So as soon as you apply the first coat, we're flattening it. But generally, this is the majority of the work done. We've mixed the plaster, we've applied one coat, we've flattened it, and we've saved a lot of work. Now to compare that to the traditional way, if we applied the one coat, we'd now have to clean up the buckets, mix up another batch of plaster. So we'd be mixing up, getting ready for the second coat. That'd be the first step. The second step, we'd have to start applying the plaster. So obviously we apply the second coat of plaster, and then we immediately flatten it. We're flattening it with a spatula, which means we've got to get the walls dead flat again. So again, there's time wasted there. And the fourth step, we've then got to clean your tools, clean the buckets, and make sure that everything's ready for the next gauge. So that is a lot of work wasted, but the big problem is the thickness test. That is what's going to make or break this test. So, I mean, not the most accurate way of doing it, but I've stabbed the Stanley knife into the plaster, stopped it short, and now I'm going to try and measure how thick it actually is. So what I've got, we're actually coming out at 4mm. This bit here is 4mm. I'm putting too much plaster on. It's more than what I need. Right, so we've flattened it, and like I said, we're looking at about 4mm here. This is more than enough. So in terms of thickness, we're actually doing okay. We've just not applied it in 2 coats like British Gypsum advised. But we saved an extra 4 steps in work. It's going to save effort on the body, and it's going to save a hell of a lot of time in general. So we've got the 4mm thickness, we've got the plaster on the wall, but what I like to do is spend a lot more time flattening with a spatula. So not only do I flatten, but I use it to fill any areas that I've missed behind. Now here's the big problem. You will start getting air pockets in the plaster. You start to get bubbles. Because it's been applied so thick, it'll only work, this method, if we use a sponge float. I've tried it before without it. It's never good. The only way you're ever going to get this one coating correct is if you use sponge float plastering. Now that's why the last 3 videos have been all about it. I've just been pushing and pushing the experiments as we've gone. And sponge floating is the only way we're going to get around it, because that's what's going to remove them air pockets. It's going to remove the bubbles in the plaster, and it's going to remove any discrepancies and any bad areas that might be appearing after it. So all we do is give the walls a light spray. Now at the end of this video, by the way, I'm going to give you a full chance to discover the full process of sponge float plastering, but you just give the walls a light spray, and then using the float, you hold the float flat to the wall in figure-8 motions, you create the texture. Straight away after it, I'm troweling out. I'm just using my, my carbon steel trowel. You can use the spatula if you like, but the reason we're doing this is, like I said, when you apply the plaster thick like that in your one coat, you're going to get air pockets, you're going to get discrepancies. Not only that, because you've not had the second coat to fill the plaster, what you might find is that you get bumps, a lot of lumps. So in terms of one coating, there is actually quite a bit of skill to it, because you've got to get it right on the first coat. That's where the big risk is, and that's where the problems will show when you're doing it. If you're not experienced plasterer, if you're brand new, then you will see problems. And the bigger problem is as a company, British Gypsum, they don't guarantee sponge floating. They say it weakens the product, so it weakens the plaster and it affects its strength. And the other reason one coating is bad is because in terms of strength, in terms of plaster, you're going to get a lot more strength in 2 layers in 2 coats. The other problem is the sponge floats are a pain in the ass. Constantly cleaning them, they're annoying. But let's carry on. Now the problems, we've got to make sure that we get the issues out of the way, and I'm not just going to sit here and say there is no issues doing it this way because British gypsum don't agree with it, and they say it does weaken the product, so that is something to consider, something to weigh up when you are thinking about the experiment. But everything else after this point is the same. With flattening now, you can see you've got a nice sheen on the wall, but it's the exact same. There's no difference now to what you're traditionally doing after this point. I'm wetting the edges and I'm just trialing out, making sure I'm getting the wall flatter and flatter. The only difference is when it comes to the wet trowel, if you're doing traditional plastering, because we've used a sponge float, because we've wet the wall already, you just don't use as much water. So all you need to do, this is penultimate stage by the way, just wet the edges and then just troweling through. I'm always cross troweling, trying to make sure that we're getting the walls flat both ways. If you're not cross troweling, you're only going to flatten the plaster vertically. Cross troweling, make sure that we're going to get it flatter and flatter as we go. So, like I said, not using a lot of water, just cross troweling across the wall. And I always like to finish with plastic. This is a Rafina Plasiflex, and this is what's going to give us that nice matte finish. But let's look at the result. Look, beautiful finish, beautiful gleam, and it looks amazing. So that's it. I'll let you decide, I'll let you do the verdict, but we've got a good finish and we've done it all in one coat. It's just whether the pros outweigh the cons. Now that is what we need to discover. Now I'm going to let you decide that verdict. But the reason this works and the reason this was so powerful is because we use sponge float plastering. Now that is a totally different method of plastering, and we will not be able to do this without sponge floating. I said to you in the video, I'm going to show you a complete guide on how to sponge float plaster effectively. So click that video there, because without this there's no one coating. Check out the full process on sponge float plastering and discover a new effective way to get a decent finish in plastering. Click it there, subscribe here. Thanks a lot, see you in the next one. Cheers.